All right, guys. Check, check, check. Check, check, check. We're starting something new. It's called Plato. Well, it's by Plato, the student of Socrates. And this is an excerpt from Plato's Republic. This is called The Allegory of the Cave, translated by Sean Iyer. Shout out to my friend Jordan, my young classmate or schoolmate, university mate. This is Plato, The Allegory of the Cave, translated by Sean Iyer. Plato's famous Allegory of the Cave, written around 380 before the Common Era, is one of the most important and influential passages of the Republic. One of the most important and influential passages of the Republic. So written almost 3,000 years ago, or over 2,500 years ago. It vividly illustrates the concept of idealism as it was taught in the Platonic Academy and provides a metaphor which philosophers have used for millennia to help us overcome superficiality and materialism. In this dialogue, Socrates, the main speaker, explains to Plato's brother, Glaucon, that we all resemble captives who are chained deep within a cavern, who do not yet realize that there is more to reality than the shadows they see against the wall. Interesting. There's more to reality than the shadows they see against the wall. So we have Socrates speaking to Glaucon, Plato's brother, written probably around the time of 380 BCE. 380 BCE. So Socrates begins. So Socrates begins the allegory of the cave. And now allow me to draw a comparison in order to understand the effect of learning or lack thereof upon our nature. And now allow me to draw a comparison in order to understand the effect of learning upon our nature. The effect of learning upon our nature. Imagine that there are people living in a cave deep underground. Imagine that there are people living in a cave deep underground. The cavern has a mouth that opens to the light above, and a passage exists from this all the way down to the people. So, sort of like it's a cave looking down, and there's people. They have lived here from infancy with their legs and necks bound in chains. People in chains. Since infancy. Remember, this thing has to do with the concept of idealism as it was taught in the Platonic Academy. It provides a metaphor which philosophers have used for millennia to help us overcome superficiality and materialism. So they have lived here from infancy with their legs bound in chains and their necks in chain, their necks and legs bound in chains. They cannot move. All they can do is stare directly forward as the chains stop them from turning their heads around. Imagine that far above and behind them blazes a great fire. Above and behind. Between this fire and the captives, a low partition is erected along a path, sort of like a small little wall. Something like puppeteers used to conceal themselves during their shows. Sort of like just think, you just see the puppet, but the bodies are being hidden. The body that's controlling the puppet is being hidden. So Glaucon responds to Socrates, I can picture it. Socrates responds, look, and you will also see other people carrying objects back and forth along the partition, things of every kind, images of people and animals, carved in stone and wood and other materials. Some of these other people speak while others remain silent. Glaucon, a bizarre situation for some unusual captives. That's what he says to Socrates, a bizarre situation for some unusual captives. So let's go back. Look and you will see other people carrying objects back and forth along the partition, like bringing things back and forth. Things of every kind, images of people, animals, carved in stone and wood and other materials. Some of these other people speak while others remain silent. Glaucon responds to Socrates, a bizarre situation for some unusual captives. Socrates, so we are. Now tell me if you suppose it's possible that these captives ever saw anything of themselves or one another other than the shadows flitting across the cavern wall before them. Like, ask yourself, is it possible that these people who are chained up and can't look to the left or to the right have ever saw anything of themselves or one another other than the shadows flitting across the cavern wall before them? Glaucon responds, certainly not, for they are restrained all their lives with their heads facing forward only. Socrates, and that would be just as true for the objects moving to and fro behind them? Like, they don't even see the objects? Glaucon responds, certainly. Socrates continues, now, if they could speak, would you say that these captives would imagine that the names they gave to the things they were able to see applied to real things? Now, if they could speak, would you say that these captives would imagine that the names they gave to the things they were able to see were able to wait, so this is a so Socrates, now if they could speak, would you say that these captives would imagine that the names they gave to the things they were able to see applied to real things? Glaucon says it would have to be so. I want to grasp that. Now, if they could speak, would you say that these captives would imagine that the names they gave to the things they were able to see? Now, if who could speak? Now, if they could speak, would you say that these captives would imagine that the names they gave to the things they were able to see applied to real things? Who speak? If who could speak? Well, Glaucon says it would have to be so. Socrates, and if a sound reverberated through their cavern from one of those others passing behind the partition, do you suppose that the captives would think anything but the passing shadow was what really made the sound? Glaucon responds, no, by Zeus. And if a sound reverberated through their cavern from one of those others passing behind the partition, do you suppose that the captives would think anything but the passing shadow was what really made the sound? Like, no, they wouldn't expect it to be anybody. They would just assume it was a shadow. Do you suppose that the captives would think anything but the passing shadow was what really made this sound? Like, would they ask any questions or think it was somebody like them? No, by Zeus. Socrates, then undoubtedly such captives would consider the truth to be nothing but the shadows of the carved objects. Most certainly, responds Glaucon. Socrates, look again and think about what would happen if they were released from these chains and these misconceptions. Imagine one of them is set free from his shackles and immediately made to stand up and bend his neck around, to take steps to gaze up toward the fire, and all of this was painful, and the glare from the light made him unable to see the objects that cast the shadows he once beheld. What do you think his reaction would be if someone informed him that everything he had formerly known was illusion and delusion, but that now he was a few steps closer to reality, oriented now toward things that were more authentic and able to see more truly? And even further, if one would direct his attention to the artificial figures passing to and fro, ask him. And even further, if one would direct his attention to the artificial figures passing to and fro and ask him what their names are, would this man not be at a loss to do so? Would he rather believe that the shadows he formerly knew were more real than the objects now being shown to him? Much more real, responds Glaucon. Like he wouldn't believe it. Rather believe that the shadows he formerly knew were more real than the objects being shown to him. Rather believe artificial figures see more truly, things that were more authentic, reality, delusion, illusion. So Socrates continues after Glaucon responds, much more real. Now, if he was forced to look directly at the firelight, wouldn't his eyes be pained? Wouldn't he turn away and run back to those things which he normally perceived and understand them as more defined and clearer than the things now being brought to his attention? That's right, answered Glaucon. Socrates responds, now let's say that he is forcibly dragged up the steep climb out of the cavern and firmly held until finally he stands in the light of the sun. Don't you think that he would be agitated and even begin to complain? Under that light, would his eyes not be nearly blinded, unable to discern any of those things that we ourselves call real? Glaucon, no, he wouldn't see them at first. No, he wouldn't see them at first. Socrates, it would take time, I suppose, for him to get used to seeing higher things. In the beginning, he might only trace the shadows, then reflections of people and other things in the water. Next, he would come to see the things themselves. Then he would hold the heavenly bodies and the heaven itself by night, seeing the light of the stars and the moon with greater ease, and the sun and its light by day. Glaucon, indeed so. Socrates, and then I think he would at last be able to gaze upon the sun itself, neither as reflected in water nor as a phantom image in some other place, but in its own place as it really is. Glaucon, undeniably. Socrates, and now he will begin to reason. He will find that the sun is a source for the seasons and the years and governor of every visible thing, and is ultimately the origin of everything previously known. Glaucon, of course, first he would see and then draw conclusions. Socrates, that being the case, should he remember his fellow prisoners and their original dwelling and what was accepted as wisdom in that setting? Don't you imagine he would consider himself fortunate for this transformation and feel pity for the captives? He's asking. Glaucon, I agree. Anyway, that being the case, should he remember his fallow prisoners in their original dwelling and what was accepted as wisdom in that setting, don't you imagine that he would consider himself fortunate for this transformation and feel pity for his captives? Like once he was free and he thought about them? Glaucon says, yeah, he would. I agree. Socrates continues, now, suppose there were honors and awards among the captives, which they granted as prizes to one another for being the best at recognizing the various shadows passing by or deciphering their patterns, their order, and the relationships among them, and therefore best at predicting what shadow will be seen next. Do you believe that our liberated man will be much concerned with such honors, or that he would be jealous of those who receive them, or that he would strive to be like those who were lauded by the captives, or that he would strive to be like those who were lauded by the captives and enjoyed pride of place among them, or would rather take Homer's view and rather wish in earthly life to be the humble serf of a landless man? Because that was from the Odyssey 11.489. Rather wish in earthly life to be the humble serf of a landless man and suffer whatever he had to, instead of holding the views of the captives and returning to that state of being. Yeah. Rather wish in earthly life to be the humble serf of a landless man. That's Homer's view. And suffer whatever he had to, instead of holding the views of the captives and returning to that state of being. That's superficiality and materialism. Lacan responds, truly he would rather suffer a great deal than return to such a life. Socrates, well, here's something else to consider. If such a man would suddenly go from the sunlight to once more descend to his original circumstances, wouldn't his vision by obscured, wouldn't his vision, there's a typo right here, wouldn't his vision be obscured by the darkness? It obviously would, answers Glaucon. Socrates. And so let's say he is with the captives and gets put into the position of interpreting the wall shadows. His eyes are still adjusting to the darkness, and it may take a while before they are. Wouldn't he become a laughing stock? Wouldn't they say, you have returned from your adventure up there with ruined eyes? Would they not say that the ascent was a waste of time? They would laugh at him. They wouldn't want to leave with them. Like, what are you talking about? And if they had the opportunity, do you suppose that they might raise their hands against him and kill this person who was trying to liberate them to a higher plane? Sort of messianic, you know? And Glaucon responds, I'm afraid so. Socrates, then my friend Glaucon, this image applies to everything we've been discussing. It compares the visible world to the underground cavern and the power of the sun to the fire that burned in the cavern. You won't misunderstand me if you connect the captive's ascent to the ascent of the soul to the intelligible world. Captive's captive captive's ascent, meaning his rise out of the cavern, to the ascent of the soul to the intelligible, the knowable world. This is how I believe, and I shared it at your wish, though heaven knows whether it is all at all true. Regardless, it appears to me that in the realm of what can be known, the idea of the good is discovered last of all, and it only perceived with great difficulty. But when it is seen, it leads us directly to the finding that it is the universal cause of all that is right and beautiful. It is the source of visible light and the master of the same. And in the intelligible world, it is the master of truth and reason. And whoever in private or in public would behave in a sensible way will keep this idea in focus. Glaucon, I agree to the extent I can manage to understand. It's an honest answer, you know? I like that answer by Glaucon. Great answer. Socrates responds, stay with me then for another thought. We should not be surprised that individuals who have reached this level might be unwilling to spend their time on mundane affairs. Not be surprised that individuals who have reached this level might be unwilling to spend their time on mundane affairs. For it would not be that their souls, for would it not be that their souls would always feel a calling to the higher things? Wait, I like this one too. Stay with me then, Glaucon, for another thought. We should not be surprised that individuals who have reached this level might be unwilling to spend their time on mundane affairs. For would it not be that their souls always feel a calling to the higher things? Like, for would it not be that their souls would always feel a calling to the higher things? If our illustration holds true, that would seem quite likely. Glaucon responds, yes, likely indeed. Socrates continues, now would it be at all surprising for one who has been engaged in the contemplation of holy things when he ventures into ways of degenerate humanity to appear ridiculous in his actions? To appear ridiculous in his actions. What if, for example, while his eyes were still adjusting to the mundane gloom, he would be forced to appear in court to hold forth about the mere shadows of justice or the other shapes that flitted across the wall, and to engage in debate about such concepts with the minds of others who has never beheld the ideal justice? With those who don't understand. Lacan, it would not surprise me the least, Socrates, but one who has his wits about him would remember that there are two things that pain the eyes, being brought from darkness to light and transitioning back from light to darkness. Damn, this is amazing. Quote, now considering that the soul experiences the same discomfort, now considering that the soul experiences the same discomfort, this man would not make light of another when he met with the confused soul. He would take the time to understand if that soul was coming from a luminous realm and his eyes were blinded by darkness, or whether journeying from the darkness of ignorance into an illuminated state had overwhelmed his eyes. One he would consider fortunate, he would pity the other, and if he laughed at either, it would be less justified if he laughed at the expense of the one who was descending from the light above. Glaucon, that's a fitting way to put it. Socrates, of course, if I'm correct, then some of our educators are mistaken in their view that it is possible to implant knowledge into a person that wasn't there originally, like vision into the eyes of a blind man. Of course, if I'm correct, then some of our educators are mistaken in their view that it is possible to implant knowledge into a person that wasn't there originally, like vision into the eyes of a blind man. Nietzsche says something. Nietzsche says something like that today. Let me get my book, Beyond Good and Evil. I just read it today. And of course, if I'm correct, then some of our educators are mistaken in their view that it is possible to implant knowledge into a person that wasn't there originally, like vision into the eyes of a blind man. Glaucon responds, that's what they say. Actually, Socrates said this yesterday. This is in the Beyond Good and Evil by Nietzsche, Part 4, Maxims and Interludes, number 87. Bound heart, free spirit. If one binds one's heart firmly and imprisons it, one can allow one's spirit many liberties. I've said that before, but no one believes it if he does not already know it. Meaning, again, when you're speaking to a crowd of 100 people and you try and tell them your secrets of life that you discovered, you can't force it down those who aren't ready to hear it. So those who are ready to hear something, in a sense, have already heard it, in a way. Just fascinating. This one's fascinating right here. Socrates says, of course, if I'm correct, then some of our educators are mistaken in their view that it is possible to implant knowledge into a person that wasn't there originally, like vision into the eyes of a blind man. Glaucon responds, that's what they say. Socrates, what our message now signifies is that the ability and means of learning is already present in the soul. As the eye cannot turn from darkness to light unless the whole body moved, so it is that the mind can only turn around from the world of becoming to that of being by a movement of the soul. The mind can only turn around from the world of becoming to that of being, world of becoming to that of being by a movement of the soul. The soul must learn by degrees to endure the contemplation of being in the luminous realms. This is good, agreed? Glaucon responds, agreed. The world of becoming to that of being. Socrates, therefore, of this matter itself, there must be a craft of some kind which would be a most efficient and effective means of transforming the soul. It would not be an art that gives the soul vision, but a craft at labor under the assumption that the soul has its own innate vision, but does not apply it properly. There must be some kind of means for bringing this about. Glaucon, yes, such a craft must exist. Yeah, it ends there though. The craft for transforming the soul. Two things that pain the eyes, being brought from darkness to light and transitioning back from light to darkness.